From education to jobs to protecting the coast, I sit down exclusively with South Carolina House District 115 candidate Carol Tempel for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview Wednesday on iHeartRadio. Carol Tempel, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. How are you this morning?
Okay, great. Yourself?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you.
That's great to hear. You know, the last time I saw you was at the Charleston County Democratic Party Jamboree, in which they honored me for my work with Quintin's Close-Ups.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you were out there campaigning because obviously you're running once again for the South Carolina House District 115.
Exactly.
I went back to your website just last night in my research, and I went on the website and it reads this: Leaderships and Results for South Carolina, Coastal Islands, James Island, Folly Beach, Kiowa, and Seabrook Islands. Thank you for your support. We achieved 49% of the vote in 2018. Let's win this race together in 2020. Question: how will your leadership close the race results gap in 2020?
Well, campaigns are about connecting with voters. So the thing that I want to do this time is to just continue to reach out to voters, because obviously the results last time showed me that I had a message and skills and experience that voters were interested in. So it's a matter of reaching more voters. I mean, when you have 35,000 people on these islands and you're one person, it's hard to reach everyone. So I'm just working to reach out. I'm active in the community, and my family and George have been active for years. So we just hope that this is something that I really want to do is to work in the legislature and just keep working to reach more people.
Is this what you want to do, Carol?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I'll tell you why. We need to do something critically important about education in South Carolina. We are at the bottom in education because we haven't prioritized it. And I think right now we have an opportunity. We've caught the attention of our governor and most of the legislators, but even more importantly, the teachers have finally found their voice and are expressing to our legislators what is needed to help in the classroom. The unfortunate thing is that in the legislature, we don't have many educators. So we need to have somebody who can have that conversation within the context of the legislature about what really matters in the classroom and how to get there. So my background is that of a teacher.
Right.
I was, and I taught a lot of grades. I taught elementary, middle, and high school. And then a lot of my career was spent as a curriculum specialist for math and science and technology. And in the course of the work that I did there, I was always in contact with teachers and principals, understanding what they needed. And I worked to provide the professional development and the resources that teachers wanted for their classrooms. And so one of the biggest things I'm proud of is the establishment of the Science Resource Center, which ensures that every child from K through 8 has a teacher who has access to the science materials to teach them in a hands-on, inquiry-based way. So that was a huge part of my experience. And then I also had the opportunity to be a learning specialist working in some of our schools that are struggling, and I was an assistant principal and principal. So how many people are in the legislature who have this whole experience in education? Plus, I was chair of our constituent school board.
Right.
So I have a perspective on education that I think is very broad, very encompassing, and I know how the decisions that are made ultimately affect the classroom.
How do you have a conversation as an experienced educator and leader with an inexperienced South Carolina State House on education?
Well, that's part of being an educator is to open the conversation, see what questions the person has,
Sure.
and then try to address or help them understand what might be an appropriate response to their question or their understanding. So listening is a big part of it, but also assessing what they know and what they don't know is important. And I had experience with that most recently when I served on the James Island Charter High School
Right.
board. And I found that that experience was really a good one because I would get asked questions. And so we were able, when we had budgetary discussions, for example, and problems, we were able to say, all right, wait a minute. We're not going to increase class size, and we're not going to hire the cheapest teacher, because those are two things that are very important for to get high achievement. And so those are the conversations that you have with people. And if you can show that you know and show that there's evidence that something will work, people are open to listen. And I've had legislators say to me, I don't really know too much about education and what works in the classroom. I have my own experience. I have the experience with my children, but I know there's more to that. So those are the conversations and the listening that one has to do to interact with them.
With them. Governor Henry McMaster wants to expand state-funded field day pre-kindergarten to every South Carolina school district. Question: how much money should be put in the budget for this right now in your mind?
Well, I'm not sure the exact dollars, Quintin. I mean, what we need to do in South Carolina is to ultimately come up with a funding formula that really works. So what you have to do is back into this, and maybe, you know, I think there's a number that he has, but the way you would want to question that is, how many children are we talking about? What class size do we want to have? How long is the school day going to be? And how many teachers do we need to provide those instructional hours? And then also, young children, you have to think of what are the other things that might be needed in terms of materials and resources and guidance and help in that way. So I can't answer your question. I mean, my question to him would be, you've proposed, I don't know what the number is. I read it this morning, but I don't have it in my head. Is how did you come up with that figure? And what will that ultimately provide? What will be the class size and how many teachers will there be would be a critical piece to know, because one thing you don't want to do is have a class size that's so big that the teacher can't meet the needs of the children.
This might be another tough question.
Okay.
How many children are we talking in House District 115 under his plan?
I really don't have a specific number, Quintin. That's something I could find out. We have a sense of where the children are in kindergarten,
Okay.
so I don't have the demographics on that.
Sure.
I mean, that's something I could find out.
Sure. And let me move over to, obviously, job creation. I know that you talked about promoting that on your website and promoting economic development that pays a living wage with equal pay for equal work. I have a hardball question for you. What's the typical living wage in House District 115 in your mind?
Well, we're a suburban area, so we're somewhere around the average income. We don't have the high poverty that, say, North Charleston has. But on Sunday, when I went to the James Island Outreach, which is the food bank for James Island, they estimate there's between 1,500 and 2,000 people who are in need of food. So that's that was higher than I expected it to be. So, that's pretty sad. I know that on the island we put in blessing boxes
Oh, yeah.
so that we can stock it. And George and I run by the one that's closest to us, and we bring things to the outreach center. Our Low Country Senior Center collects food, and I frequently post a list of pantry items that are needed. And the churches on the island are organized
Right.
to provide a specific thing. Like they're known as the peanut butter jelly church or the mac and cheese church. So in answer to your question, we don't have the high poverty, but obviously we have a need here. We're James Island, Folly Beach, and Kiowa and Seabrook, of course, are two much wealthier communities.
Yes, ma'am. And I know that obviously you talked also about affordable healthcare. You want to improve affordable healthcare and housing options for everyone. What's affordable housing like right now? And what, in your mind, when you think of when there's talk about house, obviously development, overdevelopment, what housing options are left in your district?
Well, that is an issue. I mean, one of the things we're finding, especially as I visit some of the churches, it's not uncommon for them to have vans that they're bringing people to the island because they can't live on the island. So the way I like to think about all of those issues comes back to education, and that's this, Quintin. If we have children who are getting a good education that makes them career or college ready, they are going to have an income that will allow them to have to afford their housing and for their health care. So we have to back up and think about strategically about where do we put our resources so that some of these problems can go away. And they'll never go away totally, but at least disseminate them. And so one of the things when you were asking about education and jobs is that, yes, we do have to prepare kids for a variety of things. Some children want to go to college, and we need to help that be much more affordable than it is, because it's getting to a point when it's $30,000 a year to go to college, and you get a job as a teacher at $32,000. Think about the disparity there. So we need to, yes, focus on students who want to go to college, but we also need to be thinking about those who want to have a career. And that's why I've been involved with Jesse Williams
Right.
on the Garrett Project,
Sure.
where we were looking at what's happening to Garrett and looking at what trades were being phased out of that school. And we've met with people in the school district to say and to advocate for the implementation of those trades in the new career programs that they're working on. So that's, you've got to look that there's this intricate relationship between education, jobs, and the economy. And of course, the economy is based on what people can spend. So you've got to work with them having the education that they can have a decent career, whatever it is, and that they're making a living wage. I mean, last night I learned at the Poor People's rally that it takes 87 hours at minimum wage to get a 2-bedroom apartment. That's not affordable. So we have to look at raising wages.
And I know obviously you want to keep most of the families and communities safe from gun and domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
What statistics are you looking at right now currently?
Well, you're asking me about specific numbers, and I'm the kind of person that looks at the numbers and backs into what the problem is. When you think about, here's one statistic that's pretty scary and very concerning, and that is that South Carolina we're pretty close to number one with domestic violence. So we have a real issue with domestic violence, and we have to, I think, work with people to help them learn to resolve a conflict. The last thing you want someone doing to resolve conflict is to take out a gun. So that's why I've been working with the Charleston Area Justice Ministry on restorative practices, because from the research that we've done, we know that if young children begin to learn to solve conflict without violence, that will carry over into adulthood, and we can begin to reduce the gun violence. And of course, we need to make some changes to our gun laws. We need to strengthen our background checks, and we need to ban bump stocks. So, we have some work to do on that.
How much more work do they have to do when it comes to closing the so-called Charleston loophole?
Well, there are bills right now. Senator Marlon Kimpson has a bill in the Senate. So if he can get some movement on that bill this year, I think we could close the gap. But again, it's, you just have to have people willing to work on these issues, and it's not easy to work on them, because you have a lot of people who feel that it's an infringement on their Second Amendment rights. So trying to come up with, reasonable laws, and I think the background check is the most reasonable. We need to work on passing that. And of course, if their legislature, they have a 2-year period to introduce something. So if it doesn't pass this year, then we have to start all over again. So I know the Moms Who Demand Action.
Right.
You've got Arm in Arm
Right.
is working. You've got the Brady campaign. Sure. So people are really engaged with trying to move things forward, and let's just hope it's passed, because we want to have our families to be safe. And so you're working on a lot of dimensions, like I said, the restorative practices, helping young children. But when you need a few laws, the legislature needs to address that as well.
And I know you don't have the statistics, but what exactly is the problem when it comes to domestic violence and gun violence?
Well, it's all about it. It comes down to basic relationships. I mean, why does someone abuse a spouse? What happened in that situation that caused them to feel so motivated to beat somebody? That to me is about not having a relationship that you can discuss your differences, or not making the right choice in who your spouse is going to be. So these things this violence is person to person. It's about the relationships that people have with each other.
Let me move over to, obviously, bureaucracy. You basically said on your website that you want to eliminate unnecessary bureaucracy, that is, and promote wise use of our tax dollars to make our government more effective and transparent. But how transparent has the government been with our tax dollars?
Well, I guess, we're looking at multi-billion-dollar surplus in our state right now, and we're asking the question, how did that happen? So how transparent is that? I think when we as citizens look at the budgets, and we see the end numbers. We don't see, and nobody really explains to us how they came about those numbers. So one of the things I would like to see is transparency in education funding.
Okay.
For example, there is a proposal out there that's coming through the governor's office, which I think is really good. And that is that it takes into effect, like, okay, here's how much we're spending on education. This is how many teachers it covers. This is where we're putting our money into resources. This is where we have it for facilities. All the different line items. And then once you identify that, then you start to say, well, if we want a lower class size, then this is how many teachers we'll need, and then you see how this budget plays out. That to me is about transparency, and we don't see that. Even I don't believe the school board members in Charleston see exactly how those numbers came about. So that's what I mean by by transparency, understanding how you come up with something that you're advocating, not just the end number. And in terms of bureaucracy, again, you have to look at how many people do you have working in a institution, and is that really the number that's needed? And what would happen if you reduced the number in some areas and increased it in others? For example, we know that our class sizes have gotten bigger. So I think districts have to look at where's and the school board needs to oversee this. What positions do we have in place? What's the organizational chart that we have? And is that what's needed to get to the classroom situation? So
I'm glad you brought up the Charleston County School Board because
I should maybe now do that.
because that was one of my questions in the back of my mind 2 3 questions ago. But as an educator, what's right and what's wrong with the decision that the school board is making right now in your mind?
Well, I think what's right is that the school board is looking at options to address the issue of equity and equality in the schools and the programs that we have for children. So I think that goal is really a good one. Where I think the district could do better is in working with the community. I've personally attended a few of the mission critical meetings.
Right.
And what came out of that meeting was not what we saw proposed. For example, I went to the North Charleston group because I was asked if I would go, and I did. And we didn't propose 15 schools being operated by third-party operators, management groups. So I think the community was not fully engaged with proposals. If the district had some proposals, they should have vetted those proposals through those meetings, not asking for input and then coming up with a plan that didn't seem to match. Now, where I come at in terms of, what do we do to improve our schools, I think we have to take a community schools approach. And that is where you work with the principal and the teachers and the parents and the neighborhood in which those schools are, and you come up with what are the needs that will make this school better. And that's what I went on a trip with Kevin Hollinshead, and that's what we saw in 3 schools there. I've seen that happening in Charleston, but it needs to happen more, and it needs to be an honored process so that when the schools identify what it is that will make them better, that the board then comes in and approves the budgets for it. For example, on my island, James Island, I serve on the Stiles Point School Improvement Council.
Right.
And when we were looking at our student results, we saw that we had children who weren't making the gains in reading and math. And then we looked at how many children there were. And then we looked at what was the, how many reading and math interventionists did we have. And we found that even with what we had, we still were going to have 20 more students who were not going to receive that instructional support that year because we didn't have the personnel in place to do that. So as a school improvement council, we made a recommendation and a request to up the support in those two areas. And I know that the constituent board on James Island has made those assessments again because the achievement is not where it should be on the island. And again, it's coming down to the fact that we don't have the reading and math interventionists necessary at the school level to help the children who are struggling. We just can't get to them in that one-on-one situation.
In your mind, what is the Charleston County School District's agenda?
Don't mean to. Their goal should be about improving student achievement, and they should be providing the resources based on what the schools need. It's not a top-down approach. So I think that the board's agenda should be that they should be listening to the teachers and the schools and the parents, and that then should become their agenda. So I don't know what their agenda is. If it's top down, it's not going to work.
Who do you think they're listening to right now?
Well, we had some influence of dark money in the last election. So there are groups that are interested in privatizing our public schools. So I think they have an influence on the board members. But I think what we're missing is that teachers and principals have been hesitant to speak up, and the public has been not as fully engaged. So I think if anything, all of this that's gone on with the school board has just awakened all these entities that are impacted by the schools, and they finally are speaking out, and that's a good thing.
Let me turn over to, obviously, roads and bridges. You basically said you will rebuild our roads and bridges, sea level and flooding, and develop more transportation, public transportation, that is. Mm-hmm. Where is your comprehensive plan on that?
Well, in terms of me personally having a comprehensive plan, I understand that the legislature responds to the needs of the community. So in Charleston, the city of Charleston, for example, has invited in the Dutch,
right,
and they have flooding proposals that they are working. They have experts who are working on these. So I see us as a legislature responding to these community needs and then allocating the resources that will help to it. So, my specific plan, I shouldn't be making a specific plan. I should be supporting what people with expertise have in those particular areas.
Which plan do you support now?
Well, I think the Dutch studies have been good. I think one thing we have to really look at is the sewage infrastructure. On James Island alone, we've had sewage going into our creeks. My husband and I live on a creek, and we can't swim in the creek. We can't eat the oysters that are growing in the creek because the water is polluted. So what's happened with James Island is there's been all this development without forethought about what is the drainage, where's the water going to go, and we have to be working towards systems that handle the sewage at an appropriate level, and not dump all this water, drainage water, into the ocean. Our oceans, we have to protect our oceans. I don't know if you know this, Quintin, or not, but somewhere around 80% of our oxygen comes from the oceans, not the trees. So protecting the ocean is critical. If we kill off, I'm a biologist, by the way.
Right.
If we kill off the phytoplankton that produces our oxygen, we're in trouble here on planet Earth. So again, I think where citizens and where I have been involved is when we've seen development happening and we don't see that from the plans that there's a way to capture this excess water, or we don't have the sewage systems put in place to support that, or we don't have the roads that can handle the excess of development, that all comes back to planning, and we have to elect and hire people who will keep that in their mind, that these are the things that will make our community quality of life so much better.
What is the quality of life in House District 115 as you see it?
Well, I think our quality is very good. I mean, we have people who care about each other. I mean, the fact that we have these blessing boxes all over the island is just, I think, shows how much people care.
Sure.
We have Nextdoor, which is a web-based way that neighbors can communicate with each other. I need a plumber, I need a painter,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
Right.
So, or this really ticked me off. This is what we need to do about it. So I think that's really good. This in my district, James Island is the one that has schools. Kiowa and Seabrook do not have schools. So on our island, we have good schools. So that's a good quality. We have beautiful marshes, and now we are doing more with building parks. So I think that quality is, I mean, James Island's a pretty good place to live, as is Folly Beach.
Yeah.
And then Kiowa and Seabrook,
Sure.
you have all people out there who just enjoy the lush vegetation, and they out in Kiowa and Seabrook, they've done things to enhance their cultural life. I mean, they have all kinds of concerts and things. So I think we've worked with having a pretty good quality of life, and we just need to always be watchful that we protect it.
As a matter of fact, you talk about this also in your website, quote, protect our environment and natural resources with no offshore drilling or energy scams to the public. What energy scams have threatened your district thus far in your mind?
Well, I think we all got scammed in South Carolina with the VC Summer nuclear plant, and so we all paid for that. So we need to really start moving towards more renewable energy. And I am so excited that when I see solar panels going up on people's houses, that we're now aware that we can make a difference. In fact, I'm frustrated at my house. We would like to do solar panels, but we don't want to take down the trees that are already shadowing our house.
Okay.
So, energy and paying attention to it is really important. And what's coming up now, and we'll have to see the proposals, are what is the state going to do with Santee Cooper?
Right.
Right now it's a publicly regulated resource, and right now I'm just leaning that we should save it. I think having public oversight of that would be a good thing.
And let me turn over to gerrymandering. That's
yeah.
a big topic right now. And you said this on your website, quote, ensure that gerrymandering doesn't divide communities and give every voter an opportunity to elect the best legislator to represent their community. How has gerrymandering divided your community?
All right, that's for sure something that's happened. All right, James Island is, this island, for example, and that's where the gerrymandering has occurred.
Okay.
So within this border of what's called James Island, there's the Westchester community, and there's the Soul Agreed
Right.
community, and then off here to the edge is Riverland Terrace.
Right.
Well, if you look at the numbers, if all of those people where we all go to school, go to church, shop together, along with Folly Beach, were together, that would be an entity for 115. So while I love the people over in Key and Seabrook, it is a 45-minute drive to get to those two islands. So this is an example where gerrymandering has taken out groups of voters who now cannot vote for a representative who is representing all these other areas around them.
Why should people vote for you?
I think people should vote for me because I have a lot of experience. I'm an educator, I'm a scientist,
Right.
and I've been a small business owner.
Right.
So when you think about all of those experiences and the knowledge that I have, I think that this is just a critical point in South Carolina's history and its legislative agenda, where we need somebody who understands how laws impact people. And I have an understanding of that based on, my experiences. And I've also been a community activist. So I also know how when something is right to do, I know how to get people out to do it. So that's what I bring to the table is, my background, as I said, my experience as an educator, K through 12 and administration and school board.
Oh, yes.
And I'm a scientist.
Right.
So I understand a lot about climate change. I also understand how to take a problem, analyze it, and work with solutions. And I'm also someone who is open to others' views. I mean, I'm a pretty good listener and I hope a good communicator. You always hope you're doing the best on those things.
Right.
And then as a small business person, for 10 years, I understand what it's like to make, to make a payroll. And, how many people have a variety of those experiences. So I'm retired now and I have the time to invest in my state and my community. And that's what I want to do right now.
What else would you analyze when it comes to gerrymandering?
Well, I think one of the things, and there's a bill in the House, I'm not sure if it's in the Senate right now, excuse me, there have been some more pre-filed things, is we need to have an independent commission that determines where natural groups are together. Right now the gerrymandering exists because of all the political dealings that go on with trying to, keep one district Republican and another district Democrat. The idea behind legislative representatives is for the representative to represent the community in which they live. And so I advocate, along with the League of Women Voters is really involved with this as well, that we establish in South Carolina an independent commission to set up the districts, which will happen after the 2020 census.
Right.
Yeah. So
if you were in the State House right now as a legislator,
mm-hmm.
and obviously they're back today, but what would you have pre-filed over the holidays?
Well, I don't know that I would have pre-filed something because there's some really good things that need attention. I would have, right now, the education reform bill, 419 is in the Senate. So been analyzing that bill along with the teachers to figure out what's good about it, what could change. So being that, Quintin, we have a 2-year cycle. So if you're going to pre-file a bill, you really need to do it at the beginning of the 2-year session, because right now you just want to work on trying to get through the bills that are already moving, because it all of this takes time. So the education reform bill is really important to me, and I have gone up to testify about that bill several times, and I've written about it. The other bill that this is something I would really like for South Carolina to do, is to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. In fact, yesterday I wrote letters to several of the senators and representatives trying to increase the sponsorship of those bills, because we now have resolutions in the House and the Senate, and I think this is equality. This is the 100-year anniversary of the suffragists,
Right.
and I think it's time that we address equality for women. So that would be another one. The pay equity is important. The background checks bill is important, as we were talking. So, and home rule. There are bills there about home rule. I know the city of Charleston is particularly interested in that.
Right.
So those are some of the ones that I would be focusing on.
And one last question: how would you increase sponsorship when it comes to a gerrymandering bill?
Well, you have to look at, first of all, who are currently on the bill as sponsors, and then you've got organizations that are working. The League of Women Voters is working, ACLU is working, the South Carolina Progressive group is working, and there's just been there's just a national effort on the gerrymandering. I mean, there have been court cases already that show that the idea behind our voting entities is to keep communities together. So just working like American Association of University Women is another group that would be involved. And so you just reach out and figure out who's involved, and then communicate. Again, it comes down to communication with your legislators.
Okay.
This one-on-one
Sure.
conversation. I can't emphasize how important that is.
Sure.
You know?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, when I go up to the legislature to lobby, they say, "Well, what are you here for today?" Carol, and so I look at that as an honor, and I value those conversations with legislators.
Educator, scientist, and former small business owner, and now House District 115 candidate, Carol Tempel. Thank you for your time on Quintin's Close-Ups, and welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Quintin.
You're welcome.
You asked good questions.
Oh, thank you greatly. Thank you.